Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brownfield Braintrust Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weinfield. We regularly discuss critical topics associated with bringing contaminated sites to beneficial use again. And I normally have a guest, but sometimes I just like to pontificate, which I'm going to do today. And I'm going to talk about a subject that is critical for anybody who's about to get involved in an assessment remediation project to remove toxins from the ground, soil, and groundwater. And as the regular listeners know, I buy these types of sites, and I always have to walk into these prospective purchases saying to myself and informing my investors, how are we eventually going to get a closure letter, a no further action letter from the lead environmental regulatory body overseeing our work? So we're going to discuss types of closure letters that the key environmental agencies in California, the State Water Quality Control Board and their regional boards, as well as the Department of Toxic Substances Control issue. So there have been some changes in closure approaches by these two agencies, and we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss today closure criteria from the DTSC, closure criteria from the state water boards, and then I'm going to give you some stats from the DTSC that discusses how many sites have actually closed in the course of the past 10 years, and I think you'll see a trend. And finally, I don't do this very often, but I'm going to gossip a little, and I'm going to ask my audience to provide me some backup to these vicious rumors. So let's start by talking about DTSC closures. And I'm going to share a screen, and let's see if I can do this well. Yes, I can. Si se puede. Yeah. So for those of you who are both watching and listening, what you'll see is a presentation a portion of a presentation that Mr. Ben Stanfill of the Department of Toxic Substances Control gave at a conference that Weinfield and Associates, my firm, as well as Cox Castle, a prestigious real estate law firm, gave on April 24th. So we had this conference, we had about 60 attendees, and Ben Stanfill was kind enough to give us an overview of how they close sites. And for those of you watching, we have found that there are now different flavors of site closure. And you'll see that Ben alluded to straight no further action letters, low threat closure policies, certified remedy with land use control, remedy construction complete closures, suitable to occupy closures. So there used to be one principal template for closures that the DTSC provided its responsible parties, but things have changed. And I think they've changed because, frankly, the Cal EPA regulators have gotten more strict with their closure criteria, and sometimes they just can't be met. Case in point, trying to meet certain VOC criteria from the Cal EPA soil vapor intrusion guidance that came out in February of 23. So that's changed the whole landscape for and the whole definition of how clean is clean. So um, we all want no further action letters that provide unrestricted land use and unlimited exposure. And that's just those no further action types of letters are just not being issued as much as they used to be. The DTSC and the state board have low threat case closure policies. So what it says in that case is that for the petroleum UST cases, that cases can be closed if contaminants are naturally attenuating and unlikely to pose an unacceptable threat. The water board has a list of parameters that a site must meet in order to qualify for low threat closure. DTSC has their version of this. Um, Focusing on DTSC for the next 3 bullet points, they have certified remedy with land use control. In this scenario, cleanup has completed, additional long-term mitigation measures may be in place, and a land use covenant, or LUC, has been placed on the site. With the LUC comes annual inspections and a more thorough review of the remedy every 5 years. There's a version of what they refer to as an NFA type of letter called the remedy construction complete, means the remedy has been constructed and is operating as designed. This includes long-term operation of said remedy, as well as routine maintenance and performance monitoring. Lastly, the DTSC may issue a suitable to occupy letter that tells the municipality, the county, that an occupancy certificate can be issued. So what it's suitable to occupancy closure provides the responsible party is a letter from DTSC that cleanup and mitigation are functioning such that proposed occupants of the property will not be exposed to unacceptable risks. But that more remediation is still needed. So I can certainly see that happening with the relatively new soil vapor criteria, because these criteria are very hard to meet, yet well before you meet the new soil vapor criteria, folks can occupy a building without a problem. So those are, with the exception of the low threat closure policy for underground tanks, those are all DTSC closure types, closure flavors. Back to the state water boards, a no further action status can include a no further action letter with land use restrictions, a letter that state cleanup goals are met or will be met within a reasonable time frame. Similar to DTSC, you may be issued a letter that says there's residual contamination, but it poses a low threat to human health and the environment. For example, the low threat closure policy. And then the water board may also issue a form of closure letter that said there needs to be oversight by the water board of residual contamination, any institutional controls. So this may be deed restrictions, site management plans, and the like, and it may stipulate when these oversight tools are no longer needed. So I've gone through about 8 different variations of closure letter types that the 2 major California remediation and assessment agencies can issue. And so, as my calculus teacher used to say after a long proof, so what? And this has been important because now that folks know where the 2 prime regulators are going with their flavors of case closure, you need to find out as a stakeholder which of these types of closures you can conceivably receive for your site, and if that's good enough. For instance, will a deed restriction work for your bank that's slated to provide you debt for your development project? Yes, maybe not. Will a land use uh, will a letter that says it's suitable to occupy provide enough for your bank to again provide financing? Would your investment group be comfortable with a suitable to occupy and no NFA letter? So the targets are being better defined by the regulators, and I think we should all appreciate that. Um, so you ask yourself, I'm sure, how many of these kinds of closures are being issued these days compared to the past, compared to pre-2023 when the vapor intrusion guidance came out? Well, I've got a slide for that too. And again, thank you to the Department of Toxic Substance Control. We see a trend from starting at the year 2000 going all the way to 2025 and a few months of 2026, but we'll ignore that because it's incomplete. The year's not over. But what you'll see in this graph is that for the 10-year period prior to 2023, let's say the 15-year period, you were an average closure number for all of DTSC of about 20, give or take. When you compare that with 23, 24, and 25, you say that you're at an average of about 10 closures. So the amount of closures being issued per year now versus the past 20 years or so is about half. Now, the number wasn't too large to begin with. You'll see on this chart that in no year since 2000 did the DTSC issue closure letters, more than 38 closure letters. And I should back up a little. These are closure letters for sites with soil vapor of volatile organic compounds. So it's a very specific review. And if you want to know how DTSC got this information, you can get a hold of us at Winefield and Associates, and we can provide you their step-by-step approach. But this, to me, is a little disconcerting because it was very difficult to get closure from 2000 to 2023, and now it's twice as hard. So you're also not receiving the same level of closure certainty in many instances because there's not the broad-based NFA letter that's being issued that much anymore. So there you have a brief overview of closure trends that have been documented and are in the public space. Now I'm going to go to a little gossip. I have heard through two California extremely reputable environmental consultants who are cleaning up in the underground storage tank space that they are not only getting NFA letters, similar to the low threat closure policy that we discussed earlier, but they're getting a caveat that says, well, we're closing the UST site, petroleum's dealt with, but you have some specks of PCE, TCE, and we're going to now issue this site to the site cleanup unit. Can you imagine? You've gone through 20, 30 years of remediation, you get a closure letter, and they say, not so fast. We're going to look at these values that exceeded the new VOC environmental screening levels that came out in 23. That's disconcerting. That's daunting. It's going to make me think twice about buying UST sites when I might go through years of a closure review, get an NFA letter, thankfully, and then get another letter soon thereafter that says, that site we just closed, we're going to have a site cleanup look at because you've got some PCE concentrations that are just slightly above ESLs. And these kinds of concentrations of PCE have been told to me to be in the 100 to 200 microgram per cubic meter range. So as opposed to just risking it out or doing an additional review through a WEHA for that site, UST site, they open a brand new file, brand new project manager, and this seems like overkill. So if anybody else has information about these types of department transfers at any of the LA regional water boards, let me know, because right now all I have is rumor and some emails, but nothing in the public sphere, and I don't like sharing information that's not publicly available. Well, that's our podcast for the day. I've given you some information on how our two major environmental agencies are closing sites, how there's different flavors of doing so, and how we need to be more careful and manage expectations of what a closure letter is going to look like, because what it looks like today is entirely different than it looked like, say, 5 years ago. I thank you for listening. Again, my name is Matt Winefield. The firm is Winefield and Associates. We buy brownfields, and this is the Brownfield Braintrust Podcast. Take care, everyone. Thank you.